For the last 30 years, China has done something no country in history has ever done. It lifted over 800 million people out of poverty. It built cities out of nothing. It became the factory of the world. And in 2010, it overtook Japan to become the world's second largest economy. But today, something feels different. Real estate giants are collapsing. Youth unemployment is exploding. Foreign companies are quietly leaving. So the real question is China going through a temporary slowdown, or is this the beginning of a long-term economic crisis? Let's break it down. To understand the problem, we need to understand the miracle. In 1978, China was still a poor, largely rural country. Then Deng Xiaoping made one decision that changed everything. He opened China to global markets. Factories moved in. Cheap labor powered exports. The world outsourced manufacturing to China. Over the next 4 decades, double-digit GDP growth, massive infrastructure, high-speed rail across the country. Entire megacities built from scratch. China became the backbone of global supply chains. But here's the catch. This growth model depended on 3 things: exports, real estate, government-driven investment, and now, all 3 are under pressure. Real estate in China is not just housing. It represents nearly 25 to 30% of the economy when you include construction, steel, cement, and related industries. For years, property prices kept rising. People bought multiple apartments, not to live in, but as investments. Developers borrowed heavily to build more and more. Then, the government stepped in. They introduced the 3 red lines policy to control excessive borrowing. And suddenly, the leverage system cracked. Evergrande, once one of the biggest developers in the world, defaulted. Country gardens struggled. Projects stalled. Millions of apartments remain unfinished. Now here's the real issue. When property prices fall in China, consumer confidence falls. Because for many Chinese families, real estate is their primary wealth. And when people feel poorer, they stop spending. That slows the entire economy. China's youth unemployment rate surged above 20%, so high that the government temporarily stopped publishing the data. University graduates are struggling to find jobs. Why? Because the tech sector faced regulatory crackdowns. Real estate slowed hiring. Global demand weakened. At the same time, China's population is shrinking. For decades, the one-child policy limited births. Now, fewer young workers must support a rapidly aging population. That puts long-term pressure on economic growth. China's economy was built on exports, but the world is changing. The United States has imposed chip restrictions. Supply chains are diversifying to Vietnam, India, and Mexico. Western companies are reducing dependence on China. Not because China is collapsing, but because geopolitical risk is rising. This doesn't mean China stops growing, but it means growth may never return to the explosive double-digit rates of the past. Now here's where nuance matters. China is not a fragile economy. It still has massive foreign exchange reserves, strong state control over banks, the ability to stimulate through policy. Unlike Western economies, China can directly guide credit and investment. The government has already cut interest rates, injected liquidity, supported key industries. The question is not, will China collapse tomorrow? The real question is, can China transition from an investment-driven economy to a consumption-driven economy? That's the real test. Every major economy faces cycles. Japan had its asset bubble burst in the 1990s. The United States had the 2008 financial crisis. Europe had sovereign debt crises. China is not immune to economic gravity, but it's also not a weak, small economy. This is the world's second largest economic engine. What happens in China affects commodity prices, global supply chains, emerging markets, even your investments. So is China in crisis? Yes, in transition. And transitions are messy. The next decade will decide whether China becomes a slower but stable superpower, or struggles under structural pressure. And the world is watching.